I'm joined now by emergency doctor James Smith, who's recently returned from working in Gaza, and Karla McLaren, Head of Government Affairs at Amnesty International UK. Thanks to both of you for joining us tonight. James Smith, first of all, to you, having been so recently in Gaza, what was your reaction when you heard that news this morning?
It's horrific news and an incredibly tragic event, as colleagues have mentioned. I think what's worth emphasising here, however, is that the colleagues that have been killed in an Israeli strike in the last 24 hours or so are some of more than 200 humanitarian workers that have been killed since October of last year, in addition to more than 400 healthcare workers and, of course, more than 32,000 Palestinians. As a healthcare worker, as a humanitarian worker who, as you say, has worked recently in Gaza, the situation there was intolerable back in October. It's almost unimaginable, the conditions that the Palestinian people are currently having to endure. For myself, trying to deliver medical care alongside Palestinian healthcare workers in the Deir al-Balah area, it was almost impossible to deliver even the most basic forms of care when the violence was as intense and as horrific as the Israeli state had made it at that particular time.
Karla McLaren, you heard there that the details of that phone call between the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister of Israel. What have you made of what happened, first of all, but also that reaction to it, the condemnation that's come?
Well, the reported circumstances of this particular incident are obviously incredibly distressing. We've got aid workers trying to deliver food in the context of a famine that Israel has manufactured. Children are starving to death, but only 40 miles away there is no shortage of food. And apparently this convoy was hit by multiple strikes. So obviously it's horrific. But as James said, the reality is that this is not an isolated incident. More than 200 humanitarian workers have been killed by Israeli forces since October. So it's essential that we see an independent investigation of this. Targeting humanitarian workers violates international humanitarian law. And to think that Israel can reliably investigate itself on this, as the UK was suggesting earlier, is frankly ridiculous, given the long history of impunity that Israeli authorities have enjoyed. And, you know, we're seeing multiple examples of Israel committing war crimes in this conflict, restricting food and water and fuel to millions, indiscriminate attacks, plausible genocide, according to the top court in the world. We, of course, have Hamas continuing to hold hostages and firing rockets indiscriminately into Israel. And so it's frankly shameful that we're still not seeing the UK call for an immediate ceasefire. We're still seeing the UK sell arms to Israel. We're still seeing the UK trade in settlement goods. Settlements are, of course, also a war crime. So what will it take for the UK to take actual action to stop this bloodshed?
The Israeli government has said, as we know, that this was an unintended strike, that it will be investigated. But James Smith, you talked a little bit about it there. Practically, for those working in those conditions, trying to bring aid or medical help as you were, what is it like day to day? What are the conditions? How are people able to even try to deliver that aid in those conditions?
I mean, impossible, Greg, and deeply, deeply frightening. I mean, we were all fearful all of the time. We knew that the very basic assurances that we had received of what folks refer to as deconfliction, so deconflicted locations, deconflicted travel, we knew that that wasn't worth the paper that it was written on. The building that we were staying in some time after our team had left was actually hit also by an Israeli airstrike, the details of which are publicly available. Several individuals in the team that followed us were injured, some of them severely. I think the other thing that's really worth emphasizing here is that Israel boasts one of the most advanced militaries in the world, and along with that, some of the most advanced military technology, which has been unfortunately tried and tested on the Palestinian people over several decades. For the Israeli state to suggest that any of their violent actions are unintentional is really hard to believe at this stage.
Karla McLaren, there's a practical issue here as well, isn't there? We've already seen World Central Kitchen pause their operations, other organisations as well, considering whether they can carry on. That has a practical implication for those people who are relying on the services they're providing there.
Absolutely, and that's what's incredibly worrying and distressing. I mean, as you said, we've had this attack, but 200 humanitarian aid workers killed. We've had the attack on Médecins Sans Frontières compound that you at Sky have reported on recently. There was an attack on a medical aid for Palestinian compound in January. The delivery of aid is almost impossible, and that's in the context of the International Court of Justice having ordered Israel to deliver aid and to allow aid unimpeded into Gaza. And under international law, Israel, as the occupying force, has an obligation, a legal obligation, to ensure that aid can be delivered. So we need to see the international community take action now. The conflict has been raging on, and as James said, this was intolerable months ago. We have to see concrete consequences when international humanitarian law is breached, as we are seeing happen repeatedly. We must see an arms embargo. We must see the UK stop selling arms to Israel. We must see multilateral sanctions. There are tools at the disposal of the international community, and they now need to be imposed.
James, we've been seeing images as we're talking to you of some of the work you've been doing on the ground there. Is there any hope here that this could be a significant moment, that the level of condemnation that's coming from around the world could bring about some kind of change on the ground?
I mean, I think that the global sort of geopolitical climate is such that many world leaders only seem to pay attention when those affected are not Palestinians. And it appears that that's what we're seeing now, with the level and intensity of condemnation certainly coming from the UK government when it's tragically British lives that are lost and not Palestinian lives. We can only hope that this will bring about or that this will usher along an end to the violence, which, as I think we've emphasised in the course of the last couple of minutes, is many months overdue.
Karla McLaren, do you think there is any sense that any government outside of Israel, be it the US, be it the UK, for what you're calling for, can have an impact, whether that the voice of the UK is significant in bringing about any change in direction or policy?
I think the UK is absolutely significant as a key ally of Israel, and the UK should be working with the US and others in the international community to actually ensure that there are concrete consequences, that there are actions taken to deter further breaches of international humanitarian law. We've seen, obviously, just last week that Netanyahu has vowed to continue with an offensive in Rafah, which would be absolutely catastrophic. We continue to hear condemnations from the UK government, but where are the actual actions to stop Israel from continuing? Where's the arms embargo? Where are the multilateral sanctions? We need to move from words of condemnation to actions with concrete consequences to ensure that Israel cannot continue, because it is decades of impunity for violations of human rights and international humanitarian law that has led us to where we are today.
James Smith, you've been there, you've worked there, you're recently back. Do you think scenes like those that we've seen today and incidents like this will make those who have been willing to go think twice about going to Gaza, carrying out that kind of work, obviously with the cost that brings to the Palestinian people?
I would say that there is probably nowhere on earth right now that is more unsafe for not only health and humanitarian workers, but of course for human beings and for the Palestinian people who are bearing the brunt of this. I think that people and organisations will feel more reluctant. As you've already reported, the latest supplies that are food aid that were moving via the sea corridor have turned back towards Cyprus. There is at least one NGO that has already reported that they will be suspending their operations. Other organisations have done the same in the wake of attacks against their staff and their facilities over the course of the last couple of months. And I would use this opportunity really to emphasise that really no amount of humanitarian access, no amount of humanitarian service provision will be able to adequately meet the needs of the Palestinian people while the violence continues. And this is why humanitarian organisations have been consistent since day zero in saying that what we need is a ceasefire and humanitarian access. We can't focus exclusively on bringing in humanitarian materials, emergency medical teams, while Israel continues to commit such atrocities. It's just impossible to work under these conditions.
James Smith and Karla McLaren from Amnesty International, thanks very much for your time with us this evening.